Through the day and staying, for me, this is the hardest session I think to keep people out. So I've tried to make it a little bit entertaining for you. We'll see how I go. It is late in the day. So I'm going to be talking about search and how to design search for knowledge management and how to set up your environment to really enable much better knowledge management than you might otherwise have. I'll do a little bit of a personal intro. So I'm Octavia. I work at BT Financial Group. You might know me a bit better from my work at AMP, where I led the design of their hub, the award-winning intranet. I know a little bit about intranets. My background's in design and designing user experiences for people, and I know a bit about SharePoint as well, so hopefully I might be able to share with you something that you don't know yet today. So the kinds of things I'm going to be going through today is what I know about people at work. I've done a lot of research on people in their work environments, so I might be able to share with you a few things you may not have thought about or you might not know. Filtering behaviour, how that works for people, what they actually do. A bit about general search behaviour, how are people using search, and also some solutions for efficiency and speed for when people are searching. And then finally, a little few tips about making things easier and about how to create and design your filters for people. So first things first, can you all hear me okay? All good? Good. So this is what all the things that I know about what people do at work. I've got probably 500 hours plus experience sitting with people one-on-one in their work environment. That's probably the best tool for understanding the context of the people you're making decisions for. And from all of those sessions that I've had over the last 10 to 12 years, these are the things I know. They don't think your intranet's important. Sorry to break it to you. I know it is. I think the intranet's really important, but people don't think it is. It's not top of mind. When you ask them what do you want in the workplace, they're never going to say I'd like a much better intranet. That's not what they're going to say. So you need to take that into account when you're thinking of people. Changes to you that are really important that you spend a lot of time thinking about are probably not that important to them. They just want to get along and do their work that they need to do day in, day out. They have no time. So we all know none of us have time these days. People at work is even more so. So people in the workplace trying to meet their targets, meet their deliverables. None of that includes doing things on the intranet or doing things that you want them to do. So you need to take that into account for people as well. Of having no time to achieve or no time to invest in certain things that you might think is important. People do what's in their self-interest. I love this cartoon, it's great. By selfish, you mean I don't want to do what you want me to do. So I know our employers, our workplaces, they all want us to do things. Employees don't want to do those things. They're going to do what they want to do, what they need to do to achieve the outcomes that they want to in their lives and in their work context. So you need to think about that when you're making decisions for them. How do I design things that are going to be helping them do what they want to do and then they're going to do it? Not I can tell them to do what I want them to do and they're going to do it. People don't do what they're told to do. So, does everyone know Angry Cat? He's very popular on the internet. You might have a policy, you might have a boss tell their employees what to do. I guarantee they're not doing it. You might have an area that's setting guidelines of this is the process we need to follow. They may say they're doing it. You might sit them down and ask them, tell me a process, and they'll reconvey to you what they're supposed to be doing. When you sit and watch them and you build a rapport and you get them to show you what they do as though you're going to be doing their job tomorrow, they show you what they really do. And what they really do isn't what they're told to do. What they really do is they take the shortest possible route to get to where they need to be, not necessarily the one that you tell them to do. They also have very high expectations. So we know internal systems are not necessarily great these days. They're particularly not at the same level that people expect them to be. So if we swap this out and think 10 to 15 years ago, when you went to work 10 to 15 years ago, what you experienced was the most modern technology. I can't afford that at home, but at work we've got this great thing. I'd love to have one of them at home one day, but they're too expensive. Now it's the reverse. At home, we have access to the best technology, and work isn't fast enough to be adapting it, implementing it, and giving it to me as fast as I can get it in my home life. So what that means is my expectations for technology are continually increasing. I expect you to deliver me experiences like Google does, experiences like Facebook do, because they're the experiences that I know can exist, and it's so easy. So why isn't it just that easy inside as well? That's the kind of context we're living in with employees that don't understand Facebook has a giant team, hundreds of millions of dollars to be spending on development day in, day out to improve. They don't understand the cost of things and how hard it is to get things working that seamlessly. But they do have expectations. They need to have one place to search. So the number one thing that I always say to people is we don't even have to go out and do research to find this out. I can tell you that what people want is they don't want to have to go to 10 different places to find the information that they need. Sounds reasonable, sounds so straightforward, how could we ever think of anything different? Well, that seems to be the biggest hurdle that we start with when we're thinking about internal environments where people work. The first is, oh, well, do we really need to have one place that people search for everything? Of course we do. It should be the beginning part of anything that you're thinking about, because logic there makes sense. People might want to have different portals that they use for different types of functions and activity, but no one wants to be having to go to multiple places to search for things that they need, no matter what it is. They take the easiest and fastest path. So we've all seen this every day. People are doing fast processes with paper rather than filling out an online form that they're told that they're supposed to be filling in. They're doing what's easiest and fastest for them, and what you need to do is if you want them to do something else, you need to provide a path that's simpler and easier than the one that they currently have. Then you have a really easy change management process on your hands. You don't have to do that much work to get them there if you're focusing on making things fit within their context and the way that they work. They learn to distrust search. So I've also seen it again and again, sitting with people at their desk, asking them, show me what you do. They say, well, first thing I do is I fill out this report. I say, can you show me? Can you show me the most recent one you did, or show me the process you go through? Then they sit there and they go, okay, now where was that again? And they're clicking through all their folders. They're, if it's on an intranet that they know the file's there, they're clicking through the menu systems. People learn not to trust search. If they've used search once, they don't go back again. The example would be Windows Explorer. They might have used search before unsuccessfully. Maybe they give it another go or another 2 goes. Then they know not to bother using it again. So that's important when thinking about how you design and what search you use. Another great analogy for this is in AMP we went out and did research about how people were using the intranet. People were not searching. When you prompted and asked, do you use search? They say, no, you can't find anything. Then it gives you back the results you expect. And people literally, you would be sitting with them and they might spend 5 minutes while you're watching them, which is a long time when you're being watched and failing at a task. They'd spend 5 minutes going through the navigation, bit by bit. Now, I'm sure I was here somewhere. I saw it last week. Hold on. No, that's not it. 5 minutes, a long time when they're being watched. They would continue to do it because they knew search didn't work. We rolled out a new intranet. We had fast search. It really works. Search worked. But it was a big hurdle to get people to start using it. There had to be a lot of comms and it took time. So immediately after going live, people couldn't find things because the menus had changed, the locations of things had changed, and they'd learnt it so carefully over time. A year later, went and did the research again. Everyone was then searching. No one was browsing anymore. So you need to get that in mind as well, that behaviour takes a while, and people need to be taught as well. They'll then say to a peer when they've had a success, they'll say, I tried it, it works, give search a go, for example. Can't find their own files. So as I alluded to before, everyone, probably most of us, I know I can't find my files a lot. People can never find their own files. So what do we learn from this? So we know people can't find their files. We know that they take the path of least resistance. We know they have no time, and we know we have to do things that are easy for them. So that means, wouldn't you think, if we have this great search facility, how do we let people use that for their own interest? And in the process of that, build our knowledge and build whatever repository we've got. So now I'll talk through some filtering behaviour that I've observed over the years. Most people don't filter, they use another search term. So I might type a search term in. I think I've got a video example here of what people might do. Just play it for you. So we're going to have typed the search term in. I'm getting new article board. Okay, it's going now. News article for boards. And I go, oh, that's not right. Okay, I'll take that out instead. Now I'm going to type a different way of saying the same thing. Boards in trouble. And then I'm going to get some different results. People will change certain terms. They might erase it all, retype the whole term again. People are not using filters as much as you think they would be. Most people are changing the terms, particularly in Google as well. So along with that, I'm not sure whether the two are completely interrelated, but if we're thinking about people do things that are fast, fastest thing is to retype a term, isn't it? Then look through a big list of items that are on the left and trying to work out if one of them might help you get to somewhere you need to be. People don't see left-hand filters, particularly in SharePoint. I've noticed this over the years. I've only ever seen one person use the left-hand filter, which was actually the CIO, which I thought was very interesting. Different type of mindset. So as I was showing this to my husband, he said, no, that's not correct, because I use left-hand filters. I said, well, you might not necessarily be representative of the general employee, because you're within IT in an infrastructure role, you might have a different way of thinking than most other people do, because you know how the systems work. So this is what they see when they go to the page. Whether it's the noise on the left, whether it's they've used them and didn't find them particularly useful, I'm not sure. But we went to look at working on this when we're at AMP, so I'll talk through some of the things that we noticed. So this might be the reason why Google changed. This is their old design, where they had the filters on the left. So you notice you've got a lot of options and then you've got a lot of links down the middle. This is what they look like now. Left-hand side's gone. Let's look at them side by side. So you'll notice a lot less noise. It's a lot easier for you to quickly scan and find what you're looking for, because you don't have all that visual noise interrupting where you're wanting to go. Here's an example of comparing to far away things as well. We've got SharePoint 2010 out of the box search, I think, and we've got the old Google. So still a bit of difference in terms of visual noise. One's a lot clearer and more obvious what the titles of the things are that you're searching for. So even those little styling things can help you quickly narrow down and find the results that you're looking for on a page. And here's an even bigger contrast. So we've got SharePoint 2013 out of the box with its left-hand filtering still, and we've got Google on the right-hand side. So a lot more things, a lot more options, a lot more things to be adding to my mind, the amount of work that my mind has to do to work out what I need to click on. So what we did when we're working at AMP and looking at this for a new site we're building is we did a prototype of moving the left-hand filters across the top just like Google does, and it was really successful in usability tests. So I would employ you to, if you are looking at search, if you have the capability to do some page layout changes, or do some styling changes, to look at that as maybe one of the number one things to look for in your search page, depending on how much time and effort and energy you want to put into it. General search behaviour. People can't use Boolean search terms. This is another one where my husband said, well, I can. I said, well, clearly you're not representative of the wider population. So we've got Jacob Nielsen. Has anyone heard of Jacob Nielsen? Very renowned in the usability world, so there's a lot of search-based research on his site. I would definitely recommend that you go have a look at it. If you want to find out about user behaviour, and they've done a lot of studies on different types of search and how people search, a lot of great info there on general population behaviour. People were given the task, you've got the following pets, you've got cats and dogs, find out some information. And almost every single user used the query cats and dogs. So you need to think about that when you're designing search. People are going to use labels like that when they're searching, and you need to make sure you account for it. People expect it to work like Google. Has anyone had an employee say, why can't it just work like Google? We've all been there. Of course they expect it, because they don't think about the thousands of developers that are behind the scenes working on Google, making it amazing every day. But usually when they say that, the things that they're meaning is, it just works, so I don't have to invest a lot of time and effort and energy learning it. It just works the way I expect it to. Gives me results I expect. It's easy, it's fast, it knows what I want before I do, so it's even giving me recommendations, but I didn't even know that I needed the stuff, but now I realise I do. Ads being useful as well. So people are more than happy to be looking at ads that are targeted. They ignore them if they're not. So I've got a great little snippet. Does anyone here watch Checkout on ABC? Great show. I think you'll enjoy this. It's a little, what would you call it? It's a little skit on if Google were a shop. Hopefully you can hear it. Okay. Got sound?
Board? Yours? On top of the world?
I'm looking...
Free for Miracle?
No, sorry, I want...
To break free. Queen, free Mercury. Watch the video on YouTube now.
No, I'm looking for a white shirt for work.
You feeling lucky? What?
No.
Look at over 431 billion white shirts to choose from. Try this Reebok shirt, man.
Can I try that one?
Maybe try this one first.
I don't want the sponsored shirt, I want that one.
Hey, have you seen Huffington Post's 10 most epic white shirts?
No, I just want that shirt.
Okay. Would you like me to remember your details?
No!
Do you want to tell everybody you know that you just bought a white shirt?
No! Do you want a white shirt? I don't want a white shirt. Do you need miracle diapers to wear a white shirt? Do you think that's the most outrageous white shirt?
Come on, you have a white shirt now.
So yeah, that's a great little skit about how Google uses your personal information to continually bombard you things. People don't search at work like they do on Google, so we need to think about this in the context. People say, just give me something like Google. I want it to work like Google. But you've got to be really careful when people say to you, I want this or I want that, because you need to look at the underlying, what it is that they want. People don't use Google the same way they do as at work. So on Google, you know, everything's there. There's an article on everything. Any kind of interest area you have, you can find something on. It's not the same in your internal environment. You assume that the stuff doesn't exist. You assume that there is nothing there to be reused. So you're not going to be going on looking for something like an interesting article about SharePoint, for example, even though you might have had someone in the organisation already collate a whole range of articles about SharePoint that are quite useful. They also don't click through results pages. So I'm sure you guys would have heard this before, but the number of people clicking through to next pages, next page, next is very small. This is another one that my husband said, well, I click through to the next ones. I said, well, clearly again, you're not representative of the 500 people I've gone and watched at work. So keeping that in mind, you need to work out, if people have no time, they don't click through, they want to do what the quickest and easiest path is, you've got to make sure that what you're presenting is on the first page that they get to, preferably at the top. People search is still king. People say this all the time, this is never going to change because organisations really are about working with other people to deliver things, about collaboration. To collaborate, you need to contact people. So thinking about people search, it's always the number one thing people are using on the intranet. If we mix that with, we know people have no time, and we know that people are on task to get something done, they don't care about your intranet, How do you make people search as efficient and as fast as it can be for people using it? A few tips and things about the mobile context for search. So basically when you're thinking about the experience people have when they're mobile, so on a device in transit to somewhere, is quite different from what they might be doing when they're at a computer at a desk. So in transit on a mobile, I might have a targeted question to answer, might need to contact somebody. How often is it you're at a meeting, you're like, where is that person? How do I find their details? I have to look them up now. Quite laborious for you, especially if it's your personal device. Not everyone has their internal environments available on everyone's personal device, even though they should. Filling in time whilst I'm free in transit. So the other idea of consuming content while you might have a bit of time free in transit, probably only likely for the really committed employees who really care. They're more likely if they've got some time to be, on news or getting through some email that they have to get through. But you'll get a few of them that way. Catching up on something I saw and I know I want to read, so people don't have time, they might be on the path to another page, they see something, then they want to go back and find it again. You need to make sure that's really easy. In a location that I need to find out about, so thinking about things like that. I'm travelling to the Melbourne office and I need to know where to get a coffee, for example. Is there a way that you can present that information to me without me needing to ask? Is there a way, like Google, you can tell me, maybe give me a page that's the first page I go to where I perform a search that tells me that stuff on it, if it knows that I'm not where I'm usually am located. More likely targeted versus passive, so a lot less likely to be browsing, content when you're in transit on a mobile. The only exception to that would be on a mobile device whilst you're relaxing, where you might want to see some policy information, or let's just say there's social club discounts, for example, that you're discussing with a partner while somewhere, that kind of thing. Still quite targeted though. And more likely to search than browse content. So thinking about that when you're looking at the design of mobile-based interfaces for search. And then on desktop, a lot more likely to be doing things that are more efficient on a keyboard. So edit a document, copy and merge content, targeted versus passive content consumption as well. So a lot less likely to be reading through news while you're sitting at a desk. And more likely to browse than search when you're on a desktop as well. So here are just a few solutions for efficiency and speed that I've come up with that you might want to investigate. So this is an interesting one to think about. The problem with pagination, and we know that people don't click through, and the click is actually an extra step for people to do. Whereas now we have pages that automatically load more content as you scroll down them. But then you've got the problem with the loading of more content that your placeholder's gone. So you can use the pagination to work out it was on page 5 that term was, and I'll go back to that. Whereas if you have infinite scrolling, you lose place because the page just gets longer. Whereas this is an idea of a design that kind of tries to do both. So I thought it would be interesting to show it to you. I think it's playing, yeah. So scrolling down the page, you can see things are, I don't even see them loading, but they are loading. More and more pages as I scroll, but I can also click through the dots on the right to be able to quickly scroll back to pages where I know that I was previously. So an interesting idea to think about how might I be able to use that and take that on board in designing search interfaces for people that I work with. Search tuning, very important. Who does this now? Everyone in the room. That's great. No one does it. But this is really, really important for getting the results right. So it's pretty easy, it's a really simple task, it doesn't take long at all. It's really about looking at what are the failed searches. There's already a reported file, so what are the failed searches this month or whatever. Go through that list, look at the ones that are in the top and work out why they're failed. So we've got a spelling errors, a very, very obvious one. Great example and story for this is in AMP. Their HR system is Eureka, and it's spelled E-U-H-R-E-K-A. Number 1 failed search after go live, of course, was E-U-R-E-K-A. Very easy to fix. lots of searches for the wrong spelling that were failing. If something's non-existent, you've got to get that content created. If it's one of the most popular things people are searching for, you've got to get it created. Another example, search Christmas party info. The page wasn't up yet. Big fail search. If the search result isn't high enough, promote it. So use of best pets. And measuring improvements. It's really interesting to look at your failed searches, make a few fixes, look the next month and go, failed searches have halved. Now let's do it again, let's halve them again and get them down to a really, really low number. Search results and type ahead, so thinking about integrating the two together. So I'm going to show you how Google does it, and it might be worth thinking how you might be able to employ this kind of strategy in your organisation. So I've typed search, it's not what I want, so I've typed again, and then it changes what results it displays, but it also gives me a type ahead at the same time. So it's doing the benefit of a type ahead, of helping me not make a mistake, and it's also showing changes, so while I'm typing I can see if the things are what I'm looking for. But interestingly, I forgot to point out, isn't it funny that on Google the first result for search is Yahoo? Very interesting. Immediate people search results. So this, I would say, this went live in AMP after we launched the intranet, but this I would say is probably the number one search-based function that we invested time in the amount that it saved people. So what it did was we used type aheads, we still had type ahead on the left, but on the right it presented people search, so after 3 characters had been typed, the people search started, and it presented the key info that you might need to contact somebody. And the number of search requests for people's names plummeted hugely. And the number of hits on people pages also plummeted hugely. So we're thinking about the saving in time of if there are, say, 5,000 searches done a day, and we're no longer having those people clicking through to another page, that's a huge saving in time across the organisation for the number one function that every intranet has. So I would definitely recommend doing that if you're going to invest. Delivering consolidated search practices and principles. This is a great one, open by default architecture. So if we can make this happen, I would definitely recommend that you do. This is the idea that when people create sites or they create libraries or whatever it is that's created, they are open by default, not closed. When they're open by default, it means people aren't having to make the decision of should I open it or shouldn't I. It's instead taken over with, if I'm creating it and the content's sensitive, then I have the wonder, who can access this and how do I lock it down? So you kind of remove the decision for the user for them to have to make. Then if you go a step further and you make the steps a little bit harder to create a private site. So we did this in AMP, very, very successful. We had the luxury of not having any collaboration sites when we started, so we got to come up with a governance model to address all the problems we knew everyone else had on all of their SharePoint implementations. So open by default sites and libraries, making it harder to get a closed by default site, which then means huge majority of sites are open. Make it easy to control specific permissions of libraries, permissions at library level. So make an easy way for that to happen so everyone doesn't need private sites. In SharePoint, the usability of that could be a bit challenging for an everyday user to find where the permissions are, so we did a custom page that enabled you to do that and made it a bit easier. And also make it really hard to control permissions at a folder and file level so that people don't lock themselves out, they don't get all over the top with permissions. So we would have conversations with people where they'd come and go, we need this file to be only accessed by 4 people, but then those 4 people plus another 4 need to access this other file, and then we need this other folder, and they'd go through this whole security architecture that they need. And my question to them would be, that's fine. You can have that, but how much time would you want to spend administering this security architecture that you're creating? Because it's going to take you a long time and a lot of requests, and you're going to need someone there answering your requests, and the core business team doesn't have enough resources to do that. So you're going to have to work out how to support that on your own. Every single time they realised they didn't need it for those individual people at the folder, they could, use a library for it. So it was very successful in helping people from themselves, saving them from their own decisions. One place to search on every page, consistency is key. So little tip here is to never ever have different scopes appearing in different sites that you go to. Should always be an overarching search, and I should be able to filter it down. Why do I do that? It has to be so that I can find content that I didn't know existed, that might exist outside of my site but I'm not aware of. And that really helps people do that. It's also consistent, so people don't have to think when they use search, because they always know what it does on every page. Splitting out trusted content, so that when you have this open environment where everyone can access everything, how do you deal with the problem where I come across draft content that's not final published policy, but it's someone is working on it, and how do I make the judgment of whether to use it and trust it or not? So we solve this by splitting it out. Collaboration content was split out as a result, and then primary search results was published trusted content that only a select group of people had access to. And I wanted to show you a great way that Apple filters out different search results. So primary first, and then letting someone explore the additional results. I thought this is a really nice interaction. So I've gone to Apple on the general site search. I searched for phone. I get some phone results. There you go. Then I scroll down the page. No, none of those results are what I want. And then suddenly at the bottom I get all the extra types of information. So I get the primary stuff first that people are likely to look for. And then I get a lot of the additional things of what I might be looking at. So in your internal environment, this might look like first set of results is our published trusted content. The next step might be knowledge-based material, and then collaboration material, and maybe news, something like that. So that's a great way of not overloading people with too much information, but when they can't find what they want, it exposes more results areas to them. Make it easy for people to save and reuse knowledge. Very important. This is a really old wireframe from a long time ago, probably at least 10 years old, but the underlying principles still stand. This is an example of a system where someone has tasks. When they have a task, they're automatically presented with search results relevant to the task, saving them from having to search. Why not? You want them to search, you want them to reuse information, so you provide them with the path of least resistance, which is putting it in front of their face when they didn't even know that they needed it. So thinking about in task, presenting search wherever possible. Using natural language to categorise, so I'll start this because there's a bit of a delay in it. Has anyone heard of this using natural language for results categorisation? Yeah, great. So this is a great example where I found this document, I paste the stuff in, it automatically goes through the document, it takes a while, and it infers from the content really key information and categorises it. So I don't, as a user, don't have to do anything, but it automatically works out that if I say John Smith went to New York City in 1929, it automatically can infer that John Smith is a person, and went to is a verb of what they did, and the location of New York. So you'll see it going through all the different results here, if you can read them properly. It's things like country, it pulls out things like businesses, years, legal events, all that kind of thing. So thinking about, imagine if you could get natural language filtering and metadata, so your users don't have to do it. Then you could combine this with task content and go, okay, now we can automatically filter everything. If I have to do a task in relation to SharePoint search, you can automatically find me all of the things that are relevant, and we can then filter and prioritise by business area, perhaps authors that are closest to me, all those kinds of things. It's a great thing to think about doing We know users aren't going to do their metadata. They're not going to apply metadata because why would they? Unless they can see an immediate result of why that's going to make their lives better, they're just not going to do it. They're too busy. They've got other things to do. Consolidated views. So I don't have a great example of this, but the idea of using search for consolidated views, particularly of client information, or anything that you like. The idea of using search as content that's presented to people before they even knew that they could have searched, that content existed, that's the kind of thinking you have to do in an internal environment where it's really different from how they might work externally, where they know the information's out there somewhere, they just have to find it. This is people thinking the information doesn't exist and presenting it to them before they even knew that they needed it. Encouraging people to work in libraries. So the idea of people only uploading published and final content to a library is crazy. How many of us have started a document and never finished it? I know I do it every single day. I know I have heaps of things that are never finished to a level that I'd be prepared to, publish out to the world. So what you need to do is you need to make it easier for people to use the libraries they're working in to do their work, which is helping them find their stuff again. This is a great tip. I don't know if anyone knows, but by default, search doesn't index draft content. So the tip there is to, as a default on libraries, to not have draft available as a setting. By default, only if you have major versions, then everything is indexed, rather than having to make a user make a decision of when something's published versus not. Because when you make them do that anyway, you're increasing the mental load that they have to go through in thinking and making a decision. Well, I don't know what's published, what does draft mean, who can see it, what are all the rules. You may as well simplify it for them and just have one level, and then it gets indexed and they can find their stuff. So the other ideas that go along with this is the idea of having My Documents. Why doesn't everyone have My Documents, the list of all of the most recent things I've worked on in order? Wouldn't that be great? Not having to go into PowerPoint to find all my PowerPoints and then remembering it wasn't PowerPoint, it was in Words, and I go in there. Instead, provide people with a list of My Documents based on search. Then you're giving them another reason to store their things in your environment when you want them to. Documents on profile pages. I don't know why this isn't out of the box in SharePoint. Profiles should always have all the documents that everyone's worked on, as well as all the other stuff that goes along with that. So making it easy for people to filter. Each scope is different. So when you come to designing a search and working out scopes and then the different filters that you want to apply to the different scopes, you need to think that every single one of them is different and the context is different. So looking here at the example of Google, when you're filtering for images, of course you get different filters for what makes sense when you're looking for an image. And when you're looking for news, you get different filters, less of them, of what makes sense when you're looking for news. So here's an example of how you might work through that. Firstly, you can brainstorm the user context. So in this example, I'm using the example of internal news. So let's say you wanted to come up with a scope for news, working out how people might want to filter news. You'll brainstorm first the types of examples of where people would be going to look just for news. So an example is, I saw an article previously and now I want to go find it again. I heard about an article from a colleague, chit-chat at the water cooler. Did you hear such and such is leaving, or such and such is the new whoever? Then I want to go find it. I saw a promotional item around the business. There's lots of promos where they go look at this on the intranet or go look at that. That's the kind of news I might be searching for. So brainstorm all those contexts. Then think about the likely strategies people might go through to find things in those contexts. So I might know who the author is. I might know what it's about, so it might be subject-related filtering that I'm looking for. I might know when it was published. If I saw it last week on the homepage, then it must have been, published around that date, for example. I know what location it was relevant to. I remember it was, only Melbourne, for example. And I know the business area that generated it or that it was for. So they're all There are heaps more that you might come up with. They're ones I brainstormed and came up with as the likely different strategies. Then you're going to work out which filters to present. So this is really important. You need to be careful about how many filters you use. Firstly, if the filters go off the page, the user who's typed in the term can no longer see the term and the filter once they scroll down. So the meaning and context is lost for them. So I wouldn't recommend going past the first page of filters for starters. The more you present, the more overwhelming it is to a user as well, and the more likely they are to ignore them. So be careful with how many. And then rank the ones that you've come up with by importance and likelihood. And then implement, work out how you're going to do the options. Make sure the labelling for each of them is user-centred. Do card sorts to find out labelling. It's a great technique, very easy to do. Everyone can do it themselves. Make sure your options aren't overwhelming. So when I have the list of filters for each of the scopes, make sure they're not overwhelming for a user with being too many. And then work through the usability. So do a bit of usability testing, which is also really easy. Big word, but all it means is down with someone and give them a task of I want you to find the news article from Peter whoever from last week. Show me how you do it. You can do it on paper, you can do it on a screen prototype. Watch how they do it and see if they can successfully do it or not. It's an interesting thing to do if you're interested in search, to go up to someone in your organisation and sit down with them and say, can you show me how you would go about searching for X, Y, Z, and watch them. I would be interested to hear if you see anyone using the filters on the left. So a few more tips before I finish and open for any questions you guys might have. There's no one way to design search for an organisation. So I had someone ask me the other day, can you tell me how I go about designing search? Well, you're going to have to work out what your organisation needs first, and then you design based on the needs. There's no one solution. There's general principles of how people behave, but you need to work out what your context is. It's not just about search results. You need to think wider. How do we get what we want to be indexed? And what we want to be indexed is anything anyone works on. And how do we enable that to be reused by people? So what's the context we can present those to people that enables them to use it and make their life easier? Thinking about the entire experience ecosystem. So how do we make it so that people are putting their stuff in here without even thinking about it? How do we make it so it's not a conscious decision of is my stuff ready for people to see? Because people's things are never ready for people to see. Designing an optimal, so the how. Firstly, define your business goals. What do we want to achieve as a business? Obviously, knowledge is going to be important to everybody, but then working out exactly what it is. Like, you might have specific problems in your organisation you want to address. Define the user goals of your people. Go and find out what their context is. Everyone's going to have some generic ones of things like efficiency, speed, that kind of thing, but you'll probably want to find out some specific things about your organisation, particularly where it might relate to organisational context things, where business areas, different subsidiary companies, different locations, all that kind of thing. Designing optimal end state experience. So just think through, if we had no constraints, what would the optimal be at a high level? And then work out what layers that you need to implement to make this happen. And then scale back with the constraints that you might have in the organisation that you have, but you can set a direction for the future for your organisation to follow as well. And that's it from me. Has anyone got any questions for me? Yes?
Sorry, so yeah, I love that you established that many people use the filters on the left-hand side in search. Have you done that?
Yeah, so I've done a range of usability testing on search, but I've also done a lot of observation of people searching. So probably about 200 people over the years. Yeah, it's been very consistent for me. But I'd be really interested if you guys wanted to go do your own observational research with people, preferably not in IT, and go see if they do it. Yes, up the back.
Have they then replaced the same attitudes with the menu across the top then? They're not searching or filtering on the left. Have you observed the increase across the top?
Yeah, so I did some usability testing on the new across the top search, and what I found was people were not ignoring the terms anymore because there were less words. So when you have the left nav, you have a label and then all the items under then another label, so you've got like 20 lines of words, but when you've got it across the top, there's literally like 5 max, say. So people are a lot less likely to ignore them across the top, and it's also aligned with Google that they use, so they know that pattern. People aren't going to use filters unless they have a real outcome that they're going to get from it. So most people on Google even are not using filters. Filters are the backup plan where you're really, really stuck. Usually people will just replace the words that they're typing. Yes? Yeah. Well, I think custom filters can be fine if they're based on the specific user context that it's going to make people's lives easier. So if there's not someone who's observed someone doing things that would lead you to go, you know, I can solve that with this, great. I've found that there are a lot of extra filters you can put in, and then that's overwhelming. So you've got to think the out-of-the-box ones are there for a reason. Usually most of them are pretty good. If you want to add, you know, 1 or 2 or a couple, or your organisational context is so different, or maybe you have an advanced search where you've got lots more, but around, most people aren't using them, you're cluttering the page with them, so you just got to keep that in mind when thinking about how many to put there. Yeah. So thinking about the top, so let's just say the words at the top on Google are news, images, shopping. In our world, it's news on the left, and then with the filters underneath it, shopping filters underneath it. So you're getting rid of the whole left side. You're replacing the options under with a drop down that go at the top. So it's reducing the number of words, but they're all still there, if that makes sense. Yeah, like on hover or on click on a tablet device. Yeah, one more. Sorry? Yeah. Why is it so that the count at the bottom is displayed? Right, and whether it's useful or not? Alright, okay. Count at the bottom, I noticed that Google got rid of theirs, and it's like an endless, you know, the pages never end for a lot of searches. So I'm not sure how useful, you know, pagination and how many there are is. It's adding noise to the page. Does it add value? I don't know. A good test would be take it off and see what happens. Like, if in doubt, take stuff off the page and then test it. I mean, if we've got environments now where we can, you know, do a what if, let's take it off and then let's see what happens if, you know, looking at stats, if things then go wrong or don't work, then let's play around with it again. It needs to be like a constant iteration. You never get it right. Never really finished. Yes? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So that was the point I was making of I wouldn't recommend using that. So I always recommend to search everywhere and to have search at the top, available on every page that searches everything. It doesn't make sense to go to a landing page which searches everywhere and then I go to another and I type in the same box but it searches different places. So we went through this ourselves at AMP. We first started off with collaboration sites, not the intranet, but we had scope search as a default, just as in out of the box. After we then went live with the intranet, we then had one search at the top on the intranet with emerald collaboration sites in, and then it became confusing. So then when we went and sat with users, it was like they were expecting scope to be the same everywhere, which you would expect anyway generally. So if you're thinking of doing one search at the top that searches everywhere, I would recommend not having scope search by default, but making it available. So I think we had it on click of the field. It came up so that you knew that there were other options. It wasn't hidden to the side as a separate thing. You knew that there were options, but it was obvious you were searching all everything. I think was a good solution to that problem. Yes?
Are you suggesting we don't have advanced search anymore?
No, I'm not necessarily suggesting not to have advanced search. I know not many people use advanced search, probably people in IT do though, and my husband definitely does. What I would suggest is if you're going to have advanced search, don't make it prominent. Make it reasonably hidden. Maybe even advanced search could be an option once you're on a results page and you haven't found what you needed. Because otherwise you can lead people to think that they need to put in a whole range of things before getting a search, which you don't want them to do, because really the filters do the same kind of thing for you. So let me see how we're going for time. I think we're definitely over. So one more question if anyone's got a burning desire, otherwise you can feel free to come and talk to me outside. All right, good. Thank you everybody.